Okay, everyone, we are going to get started. So for those of you who don't know, we are the UA Discourse Series, even though it says Debate Series on our sign. That is our old name, and we have rebranded to Discourse. And tonight you will certainly see why, because tonight we are going to have a discourse about a very difficult topic, but we wanted to make sure it's an important topic, and we wanted to make sure that it was discussed in a frank and honest way, but also a respectful way. Because we're the UA Discourse Series, I just want to remind you of a few things. You can, of course, follow us on any of our socials at UA Discourse Series. That's Instagram, that's TikTok, and that is Twitter. We won't call it X for obvious reasons. So go ahead and follow us any of those places for any of our future events, although this is our last event. So first and foremost, I want to give a giant round of applause to our absolutely phenomenal team of interns that we have who have given us one of the best years that we've ever had. So please give a round of applause for our interns. Thank you guys so much. I'm so glad that so few of you are seniors and that I don't actually have to say goodbye to most of you. But for those of you who are seniors, it's going to break my heart. And I promise we're going to give you a proper goodbye next week. Speaking of the fact that we have interns, we have a QR code over on our table there. If anybody's interested in an internship with the UA Discourse Series, you can talk to any one of our interns. They're the ones who are dressed in black, except for me and Joe, who are dressed in white and have jeans on. You can go up and ask them about what it is that this whole entire thing is, what kind of duties you would have as an intern, and how much fun it is. And if you go to the QR code, you can get an application to our internship. You get 3 credits per semester towards your graduation. It's a really excellent opportunity, and you get to travel around the country for free, which is always a good thing. That said, we also have free pizza. If anybody wants to grab some free pizza, it's right there for you. We also have water pong, although since we're about to start our event, it's probably better to just hang out in your seats until the event is over to go and start taking advantage of that. But let's go ahead and get started with tonight's discussion. And tonight's discussion is going to be looking at the question of diversity in higher education. We can all unambiguously agree that diversity in higher education is, of course, a good thing. The question is, how are we best going to be able to achieve that goal? How can we best make sure that we are enforcing the concept of diversity in higher education, and we are going to be looking at whether DEI programs are the best way of doing that, or, well, we don't know what the other side is going to be talking about, but whether DEI programs are the best way to ensure diversity in higher education. So that's what we're going to be asking tonight. We have some excellent panelists who are going to be addressing that issue from both sides, and we have a really excellent moderator who's going to be taking over my usual role as moderator, because I wanted at least one of these events that I could actually just watch as an audience member, just to see what they look like and not have to look at myself and listen to myself when I'm looking at these videos, because I hate that. So anyway, I'm going to come and join you all in the audience in just a second. Again, grab some pizza, but I'm going to turn this over to our absolutely fantastic moderator, Peyton Hussman.
Hello, everybody. As Ted just said, my name is Peyton Hussman, currently a senior at the U of A and studying interdisciplinary studies, and an intern at UA Discourse Series. I will be moderating. This is my first time doing a moderation like this, so cut me some slack, but I'll do my best to get us to a good conversation. As Ted said, our topic is, are DEI programs the best at ensuring diversity in higher education? The way this is going to work is there's going to be a round one opener from this side, one opener from this side, then a round 2 where we're going to have some discussion between the two teams, maybe some audience questions, and then round 3 is going to be a closer from each side as well. So without further ado, we're going to get started with the affirmative position. Our opener is going to be Robert Martin.
Hello. That's not a good sign. Okay. Anyways, now that God's done messing with me, let's see. Good evening, everyone. Before I start my time, I just want to thank everyone for coming out and listening to our conversation tonight. This will be my last time debating as a University of Arizona student, and I'm so thankful for all of the opportunities I've been given and all of the wonderful people that I've met. I'm especially honored to end this year with this discussion on this topic. With that being said, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor is cited as saying, "Until we get equality in education, we won't have an equal society." That's the truth at the heart of this discussion. No one up here tonight on either side is going to stand here and argue that diversity in higher education is not important, or even that DEI programs in themselves are inherently bad. We all want the same outcome. We want to see classrooms filled with students from different backgrounds, from different experiences, and from different walks of life. That's not the question. The real question that we're here to answer is how we best ensure that diversity happens. The affirmative believes the answer is clear. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are the best method of ensuring diversity in higher education. To illustrate this, and before we get into statistics and politics, let me tell you a quick story. Imagine a kid growing up in the kind of home that makes most people uncomfortable to talk about. Both of his parents were felons and drug addicts. He moved around constantly, sometimes motels, sometimes crashing on a friend's couch. He was poor, he was often hungry, and he was surrounded by a world that did not expect much from him. Despite all of this, he was able to make his way to the east side of Tucson and get into honors classes, but even there, he still didn't fit in. He was between worlds, and neither one claimed him. He should have fallen through the cracks, but he didn't, because something was there to catch him. He got scholarships that were made for students like him. He got mentoring from a DEI-funded office made for students like him. He found people like him who told him, "You belong here." I know this sounds like something from a tearjerk Netflix special, right? Or something that you hear during scholarship season. Something distant, something unreal and exceptional. But it's not fiction. I'm that kid. And I'm standing here or sitting here today because DEI programs, not just one of them, but the umbrella of them, made sure I didn't fall through those cracks. The truth is, when we say DEI, a lot of people immediately think about politics. They think about race and gender and culture war. And race and gender are certainly parts of DEI. But what do we really mean when we talk about this? Diversity means who is in the room. It means having students from all racial, ethnic, gender, socioeconomic, disability, and life backgrounds represented. Equity is fairness, not treating everyone the exact same, but recognizing that everyone starts in a different place and giving them the support that they need to succeed. Inclusion is belonging. It's making sure that people aren't just admitted to the campus, but they actually feel like they belong there, like they're a part of the community. DEI programs are the systems that higher education uses to actually make these values real. It's not this one program or that one program, it's all of them together to make them a universal experience for all students of all backgrounds all of the time. They don't just open the door, they make sure that students make it through that door, that they thrive, and that they graduate. How? First, DEI programs are holistic. They address not just who gets in, but who stays, who graduates, and who feels like they matter while they're there. Second, DEI programs actually work. From Georgia State to Michigan to UMBC to the U of A, the schools that invest in DEI programs see real results, better retention, better graduation rates, and stronger student outcomes across the board. And third, DEI programs strengthen everyone. Inclusive campuses prepare all students for the world that they're entering. DEI isn't just about helping some students. It's about creating a system that works better for everyone. This debate is not about lowering standards or picking sides. It's about building a higher education system that doesn't leave people behind. And the totality, the unity of the many, many DEI programs that we all enjoy today does exactly that. Because DEI is not just one program or one thing. It's not just what you hear on the media or in the news. It's the infrastructure for fairness. And it's the best tool that we've got. Thank you.
Alrighty, and we will go straight into the opening statement for our negative side, done by Abby Faber.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Abby, and my partners are Logan and Katie. On behalf of all of us, thank you for being here for our last UA Discourse Series event of the semester. Let me begin by stating clearly, we are not arguing against diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, we believe the values behind DEI, like creating environments where all students feel welcome, represented, and empowered, are absolutely essential. Our argument is simply this: DEI programs are not the best method of ensuring diversity in higher education. To ground our debate, I'd like to start by defining some key terms. Let's outline exactly what the best method of ensuring diversity in higher education could even be. The best method would be one where the majority of people across all groups feel represented and supported, have equal access to opportunities, and feel safe academically, socially, and culturally. Currently, we are seeing people in our most prestigious institutions who are not enjoying these basic human rights, which is something that the best method of ensuring diversity would enable. Diversity means more than just counting numbers. It means creating educational spaces where people from different racial, cultural, linguistic, socioeconomic, and ideological backgrounds are fully included. It's not just about who's in the room, but whether or not they're being heard and empowered to shape that room. Now, ensuring means something more than encouraging diversity. To ensure means to guarantee, to create systems and structures that reliably produce diverse outcomes every time. Here's where we take issue with the resolution. DEI programs in their current form are often symbolic rather than structural. They may offer diversity statements or resource offices, but they rarely change the systems of access and power that actually shape who gets into college and who succeeds there. Too often, DEI becomes a checkbox rather than an engine of structural change. Now, we agree with the intent and value behind DEI programs. But as students, we believe that it is our duty to question and challenge the assumption that the current DEI model is enough, and if it will ever be enough. Because despite decades of DEI initiatives, we're still seeing major gaps in who gets access to higher education, who feels like they belong, and who is supported from the first day they walk on campus all the way to graduation. Even in universities with the highest diversity metrics, students and staff alike feel that they are isolated based on their backgrounds. That tells us something important. DEI, as it currently exists, is not doing enough. And if we want to truly ensure diversity, we need to go further and do more than rely on traditional DEI programs. Here's what we're saying tonight. No single program, not even DEI, can guarantee diversity in higher education. Because what we really need isn't just more programming. We need a cultural shift, a transformation in how we think about inclusion, equity, and justice, not just on college campuses, but in the world students come from before they ever even apply. Now, our friends on that side of the stage might ask, okay, that sounds great and all, but how can we make that happen? Which is a perfectly valid question. To even begin answering that, we'd like to point out that we aren't policymakers, professionals, or legal scholars. We are students. Our job is to point out when the things that are supposed to be serving us just aren't cutting it. In order to truly address issues with DEI programs, we have to start fixing our societies to be more accepting and open about implementing them. As a student, I'd like to talk about education. Education is the backbone of any cultural shift. It shapes how we understand the world and how we treat one another within it. If we want institutions to be more inclusive, then we have to start earlier. We need to invest in public schools, in equitable curriculum, in mentorship programs that prepare students from all backgrounds to thrive in higher education. Because by the time a student gets to college, the playing field has already been tilted. DEI programs can't undo decades of unequal access and cultural messaging, but strong, equal education from the ground up can start that shift. Once again, let me restate our position clearly. DEI programs are not the best method of ensuring diversity in higher education. Too often, universities want diverse faces, but not diverse voices. If we care about equity, justice, and true representation, then we owe it to our fellow students to demand more than what DEI programs currently offer, starting with education. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, both of our opening statements are done, and we can move into round two, our discussion between our two teams. So it sounds to me as though, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a pretty similar understanding across the tables here of what the principle of DEI is, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it seems very clear that we all agree with and strive for these principles, but that they're claiming it's not the best means of ensuring those principles. One thing that I'd like to hear clarification on from both sides, and we'll start with the affirmative since this team spoke last, is could you give us some examples of what an actual DEI program is so that we can kind of ground this out for our audience here?
Yeah, I can talk about it to start. So in terms of a specific example of what DEI actually is, can everybody hear me? Sweet. So we have a few. Like Rob mentioned in his opening, Georgia State University, University of Michigan, UMBC Meyerhoff Scholars, TRIO programs, which is nationwide. A lot of examples from Columbia University exist as well. And to be more specific, and let's talk about Columbia because it's hot right now, Columbia's DEI office implemented cluster hiring to diversify faculty, and it launched mentoring and leadership development programs aimed at supporting scholars from historically underrepresented groups. As a result, the percentage of underrepresented minority faculty steadily increased and retention also improved. The numbers here are the percentage of URM faculty, meaning underrepresented minority faculty, increased from 35% from 2012 to 2022. 35%. That's just one example.
Sure. I guess with the point of the question, and I'll go to you guys afterwards, was what do these actually look like for students? I mean, I'm sure there's lots of statistics that we'll get into as the conversation goes on. But like, if I'm a student applying for a DEI program, what does this actually look like? Is it a policy? Is it a place? Is it an idea? What is it in that regard?
Thank you, Peyton, for your Thank you for the question. Actually, it would look like cultural resource centers. It would look like the Disability Resource Center, the Transfer Student Center. It would look like the tutoring centers that we have on campus. It would look like the programs we have for veterans on campus, for first-generation students. So those are all DEI programs, and that's what it would look like from the student perspective. It would look like for the orientation programs we have for students who are just coming to college for the first time. So that's what DEI programs would look on this campus and across the nation at large.
Okay, yeah, definitely. That's a good starting point. Cultural centers, real things that students can interact with. I imagine those are started because of policies or funding that allocate the resources such that those can be there. What about you guys on this side? Do you have any additional examples or maybe contentions with that?
So we have a really good example from Stanford University. Before I get into this, when we're talking about higher education, I want to be clear, we're not just talking about students. Too often we are in the mindset that we're just talking about students, but faculty are included as well. Even people that maybe don't directly go to classes, but still use, university resources. So Stanford University, they put their staff through a training that was supposed to curb feelings of white supremacy. And these two faculty members filed a complaint. They were Jewish. They said that they were pressured to attend the DEI program's racially segregated Whiteness Accountability Affinity Group. The group was created for staff who hold so-called privilege through white identity, who are white identified or maybe newly grappling with or realizing their white identity or are seen as white presenting and passing. The complaints also allege that the DEI committee endorsed the narrative that Jews are connected to white supremacy, advancing anti-Semitic tropes concerning Jewish power, conspiracy, and control. So that's one of the examples we have, and it speaks to the larger issue of the values behind these programs. They are great, but sometimes people fall through.
Sorry to cut you off. Just for the sake of clarification, I'm just trying to set a baseline so that we can agree on what DEI programs looks like. We can get into talking about whether they're good or bad in a moment, but that example sounds like maybe diversity training for faculty. We have student resource centers. These are just kind of examples for what we can all agree on both sides that is what DEI entails, right? Okay. Now we can get into the meat and potatoes of the prompt, right, which is whether or not it's the best, whether or not it can ensure. Sounds to me as though you're saying that it might not be the best for some faculty members. You guys, I imagine, will argue that they are the best. Let's start with you since you're making the assertion. Why is it that DEI programs, as we've agreed they are the best for ensuring diversity?
As I stated in my opening, we're not talking about one DEI program or another. We're talking about all of them together. So while you can point out probably a million examples of one DEI program having one thing that went wrong with it, when you take all of these together, because these programs don't exist in a vacuum, when you take all of these programs together, they ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion for all students. When we talk about things like cultural centers, it's not for some students that cultural centers exist. It's for all students. And when we talk about faculty training, it's not some faculty that should receive training. It's the fact that all faculty receive some form of sensitivity training.
So they're the best in how all-encompassing they are and their abilities to impact all students, not just a subgroup or all faculty. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and also citing one group of, thank you, citing one Stanford programming does not take away from the fact that something is the best. You would need a lot more examples and a lot more detailed statistics to prove that DEI programs across the nation are not the best.
Well, they've only had the opportunity to speak once, right? So let's give you guys an example or an opportunity to provide some of these examples. So they're saying it's the best because of their ability to impact the most students, impact the most faculty. Why would you contest that it's not the best?
So I think that part of our argument is that DEI programs are only as good. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. DEI programs are only as good as their worst program. And the reason that we think this is because even though we think the DEI intentions are admirable, the failures are concerning because they can actually cause backlash that can unintentionally kind of flood into the intentions behind DEI. There was a survey done by Harvard Business Review, and they found that because of certain programs, because of certain diversity training, up to 52% of American workers that participated in the survey were no longer supportive of DEI. I think that our concern is that, this lowering support of DEI can bleed into the actual values.
I also just want to raise a question with your guys' interpretation of the prompt. So we're talking about DEI programs as the best method of ensuring diversity in higher education. But when we bring up, valid concerns of DEI programs that are falling short, and you rightly point out they're just a couple examples. But when we're talking about the best, what is your response that, yeah, it might be just a few examples, but those examples still are important?
Do you want to?
I think my personal response to that question would be that, frankly, it's irresponsible to remove DEI programming when we do not have an alternative that's any better at ensuring diversity in public education, or in higher education, I mean.
Can I? I'd like to say that we're not advocating for removing DEI programming. We're just saying that it is not the best method of ensuring diversity in higher education, which is why in my opening, I say we need education first and foremost, and then DEI programs can come after that.
Yeah, and I think that when we point out that the examples that you're giving are very cherry-picked examples of a DEI program sometimes falling flat, and again, I know we haven't had an opportunity to discuss more, but I feel like we're still hung up on the Stanford example for one. Secondly, when we talk about that not being a great example of why DEI programs aren't the best at ensuring it, is because it is irresponsible to say it's not the best because sometimes some things don't work as well as they should.
Okay. I have a survey from Harvard, and I think you referenced this, but a little bit getting into more details. Nearly 2,300 university faculty, staff, and students participated in this survey. 56% of Muslim respondents and 26% of Jewish respondents said that they felt physically unsafe on campus. 92% of Muslim and 61% of Jewish university affiliates polled that they feared academic and professional repercussions for voicing their personal or political opinions. So if we're talking about one of our prestigious universities, Harvard is this kind of gold standard of diversity of higher education in the United States. The students, the faculty there, they do not feel safe.
Mr. Logan, I fear that statistics is disingenuous. That has nothing to do with DEI programs. In fact, DEI programs intend to fight that feeling of not feeling safe on campus. And to answer Ms. Abby's statement about DEI programs being flawed, well, there is no perfect system in this world. And if you're trying to find something that's perfect without flaws, it doesn't exist in this current state of our world. There's no way that you can find something and find it flawless. We're not saying DEI is flawless. We're saying it's the best method of ensuring diversity. So unless you can prove that there is something that is better than DEI programs, then I fear that I'm not sure what your standpoint is right now.
Well, again, for the purposes of this debate, just to reiterate, everybody here is pro-DEI, right? We all like this, and we all want DEI to continue to happen. It's just a matter of whether or not it is the best, right? And everybody here, either side can acknowledge that there are flaws, but let's kind of look at maybe a specific example just to kind of tease apart why we think something may or may not be the best. And it's been brought up on both sides, faculty diversity training. I know that Ted, our amazing administrator here, has personally told me, and I know that this is universal for a lot of professors, have to go through a course to ensure that they're more aware of student backgrounds, providing educational services that are best tailored to be for a diverse community. So I guess I'll start with this side here. What is of course we all acknowledge there are benefits, but why may that not be the best as opposed to an alternative?
Sure. So being a little familiar with kind of these courses that faculty have to go through, they have to go through this sort of online course for however long and take a little test at the end. If they pass with, I don't even know the percentage, it's probably like 70 or something, they get to teach. If they don't pass, they don't get to teach. So do we really think an online test is the best way of ensuring safety across ethnicities in our university campuses? Personally, I don't think so. And to address something else that was raised up, pinning the sort of burden on us to come up with this perfect method of ensuring diversity. That's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss DEI programs as they currently stand, and we disagree that they are the best method. We're not saying that they should be perfect, not at all. We're just saying that they're not the best.
Just to address that real quick before I get to answering your question, I think that the way that you described these diversity trainings is not a fair representation of what they actually are. I work at the university, and the diversity training that I had to go through was extensive. It was 16 hours of diversity training spread over 3 days. Further than that, when I taught, the diversity training that I had to go through on the south side of Tucson took a matter of 2 weeks. It was not just you do a little course and then you take a little test. Secondly, one of the most famous examples of testing like this is in the political science field. When you're taking a poll or a survey, yes, you have all of these easy questions that are easy to get through and you could kind of do semi-mindlessly, but they also throw in questions that either A, are a little more complicated, that require you to think, or that make you think that you're saying the right thing, the thing that the survey wants you to think, but in reality, they're worded differently. Or number two, they change the pattern of the answers. So that way, if you're mindlessly going through the test, you enter the wrong answer, and either you have to retake the test or you have to retake the entire course. So representing them as this easy thing that you just go through and it's whatever, I don't feel like is an honest and fair way of representing it. When we talk about faculty training, there is real-world examples of faculty training being used and being effective. For example, in Amherst College, over 90% of students were required to complete anti-racism training. And then after that, they were required to do this in order to become employees at the university. After doing this training, URM faculty, that's underrepresented minority faculty, after the students completed the training, hiring rose by 10% over just 3 years, along with campus surveys, which showed improved perceptions of inclusion. These are real things, because it's not like these surveys just appeared and then suddenly everyone's doing great. These surveys happened over a period of time in continuance with other DEI programs, which in turn ensured diversity.
Also, Mr. Logan, to shift this debate a little bit, because I feel like you've been talking a lot about surveys and trainings. What about cultural centers? What about disability resource centers? What about the programs like tutoring? How does that fit into your not the best definition?
Well, I mean, I'm the one who brought in the let's talk about diversity training first. We can certainly get into other things, but I want to give you guys an opportunity to respond. So we hear a lot about how diversity training does actually increase numbers, but is it the best? And I imagine you're going to say no. Why is it not?
I'd like to address Robert's point. First of all, thank you for your personal example in diversity training. But I'd like to ask that, is all diversity training consistent with all different institutions? Because from what we've seen, it isn't. And statistics point to that survey that we've taken that diversity training isn't consistent across all universities and all campuses. And how can we truly ensure that diversity is being included in every institution if their education and their training isn't the same?
Is the makeup of every single university exactly the same? No, they're not, which is why things differ from university to university, because they're meeting the differing needs, the differing populations of those universities.
Okay, but now I feel like we're shifting goalposts a little bit. So earlier on, you said that our Stanford example is just Stanford, but now you are saying that universities are different. They have different programs. So where's this kind of disconnect of like, okay, for Stanford, it's just Stanford, but for other universities that may exist that have, lackluster programs, they're just different universities. Can you just kind of explain that, please?
Yeah. So I think something that I would like to stress and reiterate in a moment is that one of the key intrinsic values that comes with DEI programs is the totality of it. That is a core part of our argument. The totality and the levels of intersectionality reached by DEI programs as a whole is what makes it the most effective way of ensuring that we have diversity in higher education. I don't think there's really another way that I can say that other than totality is really important to our argument.
And to more directly address what you just said, I don't see how me pointing out that Stanford is just Stanford and other universities are just other universities is in contradiction to what I'm saying. I'm saying that every university is different, but at the same time, these universities have DEI programs. They have an umbrella of DEI programs.
Sure, but just to clarify, sorry, this is one last thing. You saying it's just Stanford doesn't address the survey or the complaint of the Jewish students being feeling as though they don't belong.
I would ask, what was the context in which that survey was taken? I mean, when the Israel-Palestine war just broke out and you surveyed Jewish or Muslim students on the campus and they said that they were unsafe, was that because DEI programs aren't doing their job? Or was that because there's a very real-world event happening? In the same vein, the only thing that was making them feel safe, the only thing that was making them feel included was those cultural centers, which are a part of the umbrella DEI programs.
Unfortunately, maybe we can get a response after we move into audience questions, but does anybody have any questions for either of our panelists regarding the conversation so far? AJ. Okay, so AJ, audience member, just said we've had declining rates of approval across the country with DEI, and is that a fault of their actual implementation? Is it a cultural thing? What is the cause of the disgruntled nature or some people may have with DEI? I guess we'll start with you guys.
One survey taken in isolation, all I can do is speculate, of course, but I would say that there's a number of things that could be at play there. Whenever you take a survey, there's, of course, a lack of information around DEI. I mean, DEI programs are all over the news right now, but the whole reason we're having this conversation is, number one, there's a lack of knowledge of what they really entail, right? I'm sure that many of you on campus today didn't know that things like TRIO or like cultural centers fall under that DEI umbrella. What you normally think of is those things like the sensitivity training, for example. And another thing is that ensuring equity is an uncomfortable process. People who are born into a demographic that has more money or they're born into a certain zip code are typically not going to want to give away that money to programs that are designed to help disadvantaged students. It's an uncomfortable process, and it's supposed to be.
And then for the negative response to that question or what Robert has said?
So I would argue that it is somewhat of a cultural problem, but I do think that that cultural problem is reflected in how we practice DEI. I think that our values and our beliefs in diversity, equity, and inclusion should hinge on our values, and then those values in turn should influence the DEI, not the other way around. I think what we need to do if we want to solve these problems is get to the root of them and solve the cultural problems first. Otherwise, we do have these problems with somewhat performative programs in DEI, despite their, admirable intentions. And again, we're not saying DEI is bad. I think that what we're saying is that we want to get to the root of the cultural problem, so that's reflected in the programs, and maybe DEI isn't the best way to do that.
Okay, another audience question. Oh, look at that. Ted is raising his hand. Please yell so that I can hear you, and then I'll repeat it back for everybody. Sure, and to repeat for everybody else who may not have heard, Ted's considering whether or not there's a world where we have a sort of bottom-up system of ensuring diversity of students and individuals, groups of friends, as opposed to an administrative top-down version, and I guess what the efficacies of something like that as opposed to DEI would be. We'll start with this side here.
Thank you for that question. And this is why we're talking about education and why education is so important. Because as students, we believe that it is our duty to find when the things that are supposed to be serving us just aren't cutting it and aren't working. And so student voices matter. And I think that if we can implement student voices into how we should run our DEI programs, that also is part of creating that cultural shift that we would like to see.
Thank you, Ms. Abby, and thank you, Ted, for your question. And I would like to say that we do have that system where students' voices matter. It's not just in the student trainings. Again, DI programs expand far beyond surveys and trainings, and they're seen in tutoring centers, cultural resource centers, like I've said before, disability resource centers. And in those places, we do have student-led initiatives. When the protests were happening on campus, those were students-led initiatives backed up by DEI programs. So it's not an either-or system. It doesn't have to be the students versus the administration. It should be both, just like we have both right now. DEI programs combine student voices with administrative help because this is a systemic issue. So we cannot pretend that just student voices without any policy backing it up is enough.
I want to point out what you just said. You said it's a systemic issue. Do we think DEI programs can, quote unquote, solve our culture? I know that's a loaded question, but what's your opinion on that?
I think that when we talk about the umbrella of DEI programs, one of the main things that they're supposed to do is encourage us all to think a little deeper, to think with more empathy. And what that does is it does encourage us to solve these problems of exclusivity in colleges, right? If you're putting yourself in college, you're going to meet a lot of new people from diverse backgrounds. DEI programs amplify that.
Okay, quick response from Bella, and then we'll see if there's maybe one more audience question before we move into our closings.
Yeah, just something I'd like to add before going back and forth to address the original question that Ted had, whether or not we can look at maybe, a bottom-up system as opposed to a top-down. As Blossom already mentioned, that's already happening. Student advocacy is an enormous part of DEI programs as a whole. With that said, I also think that if you're looking at doing from the bottom up approach, meaning starting with student advocacy, that in and of itself is going to be less equitable than going from the top down, because we're then assuming that all of these students have the same resources and have been given the same opportunities to learn things like leadership skills, advocacy, etc. And that is not the case. And that is why it's really important that we administer this level of fairness, that we administer DEI not only from the bottom up, but also the top down.
Okay, and then it looks like we have one more hand raised for audience questions. Jacob. Yes. Sure, so it sounds like what Jacob's saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there not a risk with the likes of top-down policies that the actual students that we're intending to represent aren't actually being represented because they're not as directly influencing how those policies are crafted? And I'm going to start with this side as a response to that.
Yeah, so something Abby mentioned in her opening is we actually want to embrace a sort of bottom-up in the terms of time. We want to start focusing at the lower rungs of education, elementary school, middle school, high school. This is the time that we should be instilling values into our students. If we're waiting until university to instill those values, that's far too late for a lot of people. I know this is a common joke we share. You get to university and you think you know everything. You turn 23 and you know everything. So it's too late to start preaching those values until you're a young adult.
Wow, the taking personal shots at me for being 23 is crazy, but just to answer your question, I do think that there are problems with just a top-down approach, which is why we don't have that, right? When the administration does something that we don't like, and I'm not going to get too specific because I'm still a student here for a little bit of time. When the administration does something that we don't like, it's the umbrella of DEI programs such as cultural resource centers that advocates and plans and organizes ways to combat that. For example, when the University of Arizona was planning on getting rid of several of their cultural centers, there was an enormous uproar from the students in which they signed 3,300 signatures to combat this, and then the university stopped. They halted entirely, and we kept those programs. So I agree that a top-down approach is dangerous because of things like overreach, right? You can't always trust administrators to do the right thing, but at the same time, it's not like we have no options, and those options are safeguarded and guaranteed and ensured by DEI programs. And also, I feel like it's a little unfair to the prompt that we're here to discuss to say, well, DEI programs aren't the best at ensuring diversity in higher education because we should really start and be looking outside of higher education. That may be good, and we'll all agree that education is a beautiful, brilliant thing that we all need, but we're looking at in higher education. Within higher education, what can we do to address that? DEI programs.
I mean, just to be a little fair to them, I don't think they were trying to extrapolate this to outside of higher education, just that there's a phenomenon of a... No, I'm just clarifying. Just that there's a phenomenon of, things take time, whether it's government or, the likes. But yeah, go ahead. Okay, then I guess we will be moving into closings. Give them a round of applause for our round 2. All right, and then closing for the affirmative is going to be Blossom Obi.
I feel like I can't talk. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking this journey with us tonight. It's been an honor to debate a topic that cuts so deeply into the heart of who we are and who we wish to be, or hope to be. I am honored to be giving my last closing speech as a debater for the University of Arizona. And while this moment is bittersweet, this journey has brought me the most incredible people. Rob, Bella, thank you. And of course, to my opponents who have also been my teammates and friends, I am so proud of you. Now, before I begin, I would like to directly address Ms. Abby's opening statement. Ms. Abby, in your opening statement, you had mentioned that DEI was flawed and therefore could not be the best. And to that, I would like to ask you, which system do we have in place right now is not flawed? And if you can bring that one up, I guess my teammate and I would gladly fold to you. Now, the crux of tonight's argument hinges on whether DEI programs are the best methods of ensuring diversity in higher education. Throughout this debate, I hope we have made one thing clear. The inclusion of a group of people does not inherently exclude any others. In fact, it is by understanding that there are some people in our community that need to be brought into the picture that we can all stand on equal footing. Equity is not a pie that shrinks with every additional slice. It is a table growing longer, stronger, each seat making the conversation richer. I understand that some of you may be worried about academic freedom. If we all think alike, then are we free? Are DEI programs training conformity, like your little Stanford survey? The answer is no. DEI programs aim at one thing, and that is to provide everyone, regardless of socioeconomic status, race, gender, and sexual orientation, an opportunity in a world that has been systematically flawed. To treat others with respect is not to train conformity. It is to acknowledge that every human being is inherently deserving of opportunity and access. Tonight, the negative has argued that DEI is a mere band-aid, an insufficient surface-level fix that fails to address the deeper administrative problems of inequality. But let's pause and ask, if poverty, racism, and exclusion are not accidents, but products of a system, then how do we fix a broken system without building new systems to dismantle the old? As Nelson Mandela once said, poverty is not an accident. Like slavery and apartheid, it is man-made and can be removed by the actions of human beings. DEI is not a band-aid. DEI is the action. It is the law, the policy, the deliberate correction of the legacy of exclusion. It is the administrative response to an administrative problem. When the negative asks us to reject DEI programs, what are they offering in its place? How can we address systemic inequality and inequity without systemic solutions? If the house was built crooked, we don't fix it by walking away. We fix it by rebuilding, beam by beam. DEI is that reconstruction. And we see this in action through programs like Federal Trio programs, which were created to increase college access and graduation for low-income, first-generation, and underrepresented students. We see this in cultural centers. We see this in disability resources, programs for veterans, and transfer students. We see this in the very spaces that sheltered students like me. Because this debate isn't abstract to me, it's personal. I came here as an international student, no family, no friends, no cultural blueprint. But here in America, I also found myself counted among many minorities. A woman, a foreigner, a black person navigating systems not built with me in mind. But the DEI programs on campus had me in mind. The cultural resource centers gave me a job. The programs gave me a sense of belonging. I found friends, family, and a voice. I was seen alongside many others like me. The negative argues for idealism. If the world is perfect, if only we could fix culture, then we would not need DEI programs. But the world is not perfect, Mr. Logan. Revolution is not idealism. Revolution is not a dream. Revolution is structural, systemic, tangible. You cannot dismantle a system without building a system to replace it. And if the revolution will not be televised, then DEI is the platform of amplification. DEI is not utopian. DEI programs are not a pragmatic revolution. It is a beam by beam reconstruction of a house that was built crooked. Everyone's journey to education is different. But if our society is to progress, we must ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, can access education. The very foundation of America stands on the principles of DEI initiatives, where every person who works hard and has the will is given the opportunity to succeed. This is the America I know, and that is the America DEI initiatives seek to uphold, Mr. Logan. Thank you.
Okay, and then closing out for the negative side and our debate as a whole and our semester as a whole is Logan Brabant.
Such a high honor. Good evening, everyone. As the final speaker of tonight, there are a few things I want to say before I really get started. I apologize in advance. I'm going to take a lot of your time. First off, I want to thank everyone here on stage. Round of applause for everyone here. They've done an amazing job. I want to give very, very special thanks to Robert, Blossom, and Peyton. If you guys didn't know, we co-host a podcast together. Robert and Blossom will be leaving me and Peyton after this semester, so we're very, very sad. But they have no doubt done great things in their time here. Want to thank Ted and our other interns in the crowd. You guys are the best. Couldn't be up here without you, and wouldn't be the student I am today without you guys. Now, I just got done telling you guys why my friends are the best. Now I'm going to tell you why they're wrong. I want to address a few things that they've said. First, they have repeatedly said that our examples aren't good enough, that they are cherry-picked. They keep asking us to come up with a better system. But the point of this debate is to decide if the status quo is the best. It is not to come up with a hypothetical utopian vision that can replace all of our institutions. That's not what we're here to do. That's not what we're asked to do. That's not what we are doing. Now, and we didn't get to talk about cultural centers, and we really like them. Blossom, you brought them up. We really, really like them. But the fact that they even have to exist in the first place demonstrates issues within our society. Cultural centers are amazing, but the fact that they are a requirement for our students to feel safe is not a good thing. They kept bringing up that we only have one study, one example. Now, we actually brought up two universities, Stanford and Harvard. As a side note, I applied to both, and if it is not painfully obvious, I was accepted. But we didn't go into enough depth for all these. Unfortunately, we are limited by time, and I'm not an encyclopedia of examples for all of these. But I will say there are plenty of surveys, plenty of studies from Harvard, Stanford, UCLA, even here at the U of A that demonstrate that there are some issues with DEI programs and that students do not feel safe. And to speak to that, Robert, in your opening, you mentioned that you didn't fall through the cracks, that the door was open for you and that it was made sure that you got through. But I'd like to point out that as touching as that story is, and I'm truly glad that you could make it here today, that's not the same story for everyone. Some people do not make it. Some people do fall through the cracks. And that is something, if we're talking about ensuring diversity, that is something we need to address. They argued our solution of education is outside of the prompt. But this prompt isn't asking us to only stick to programs in higher education, only diversity in higher education. If something instills those values of diversity, equity, and inclusion in everyone before they even reach higher university, is that not a valid solution to the problems we face in society? With that out of the way, let's get to the rehearsed part. I've been flying off the cuff. After slavery was abolished in 1865 and segregation outlawed in 1964, we as a society, we knew one thing. We needed to include all people of all races, all genders, and all backgrounds in our institutions. We cannot plague ourselves with bigotry in our government, our universities, or our public places. Such was the motivation for the creation of DEI programs. We are in agreement that these values are a good thing and pushing us in the right direction. But when we are asked if these programs are the best at ensuring diversity in higher education, we believe that we have raised enough significant questions to come to a consensus. In case we got lost in the weeds, allow me to restate our position. We do not believe that DEI programs, as they currently exist and are employed, best ensure diversity in higher educations. We do not believe that any social program can ensure diversity. There are simply too many cracks, too many people who are still suffering to meet any of the criteria we have established. For something to be the best, it has to be as good as it can get. And ensure means to guarantee something. Neither of these benchmarks is consistent with the reality of current DEI programs. More importantly, waiting until students reach university to instill diversity is not enough. It's too late. To echo our opening statement, DEI programs can't undo decades of prejudice, decades of targeting, decades of minority communities suffering. It's not enough. Now, if you are satisfied with just being in the room and not having a voice, that is your right. But we can do better. We can always do better. The strength of our use is that we are relentless. We do not stop until our goals are met. Everyone in the crowd here today has high convictions, ideas of how you can make the world a better place. I'm here to tell you, and we have argued here today, that you can achieve those goals. Thank you.
Alrighty, and with that, our final debate of the semester is done, and I will hand it off to Ted.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Excellent job, all 6 of our panelists. And so now, because we can't really do this with a QR code and we can't really do this with a consistent audience, we're just going to take our final vote by way of applause. So let's go ahead and hear who it is that you think ended up winning tonight's debate. If, in the end, you are in favor of the side arguing that, yes, indeed, DEI programs are the best way to ensure diversity in higher education, this side over here, please give it up for these 3 right here, if that is who you're voting for. And if you and if you are voting that no, DEI programs are not necessarily the best way to ensure diversity in higher education, please give it up for these 3 right over here. Let's hear a round of applause. All right, I think that we have our winners. Congratulations to all of our debaters. Again, we have a QR code right over here if anybody is interested in applying for an internship, or you can ask any of our interns up here. We have some pizza left. It's a bit cold, but go ahead and grab it if you want to. Everybody, again, thank you very much for coming. Follow us on UA Discourse Series on all of our social media, and thank you all. Good night. Interns, let's go to Frog.
We're all winners.
What a democratic way of voting.
Let's not get into bean counting.
Oh God.